Welcome everybody. Welcome back. So I'll be talking to you for about 10 minutes about scenarios and specifically about outcomes of a workshop that we run earlier this year with some of our stakeholders. And before I go any further, I really want to thank everybody who contributed in either helping to organize the workshop, host the workshop, and putting all of this together. So thank you to all of the co-authors down there. So very quickly, an outline, I'll have a very brief rationale and a bit of background, and then I'll tell you how we run our workshop, and then go on to some of the outcomes along three main themes. And then I'll give you a bit of a practical example from one of the case studies in the project. And if I have time, I'll go over concluding remarks. So the course is changing. That's something that we do know. And a picture here is showing the Dutch sand engine, and over 5 years with all the changes. And the reason that the course is changing, well, there's mainly two big things. One is it's changing because of its response to climate scale variability and trends, and on the other side, it's responding to human intervention and management, whether they are sort of from very engineered schemes. You've got a picture with groins in this case, or even from more nature-based options. And all these reasons really tell us that we have to understand what the impact of the actions and decisions that we're taking now, what the impact is going to be within the context of a changing climate. And typically, the way that we get to do this is looking at the response of coastal systems to a series of scenarios. The key question being, how do we best develop and design these scenarios so that they are usable, useful, and trusted, basically. So there's a bit of background. I really want to get started from a typology from a bit over 15 years ago by Burgesson et al., which split scenarios into three categories, three main categories: predictive, explorative, and normative. And they associated with each one of them a key question. So predictive scenarios seek to address the question of what will happen, whereas exploratory scenarios looking more at what can happen. And the third type, the normative scenario, is looking at how to reach a specific target. So when we're looking at sort of the impact of climate change, the broader context is we've got a very uncertain future. And on the bottom left there, you have a picture showing the sea level rise projections for London from the latest IPCC assessment. The key message there is that as you go towards the right of the picture, you've got sort of increasing uncertainty. So you've got a very wide range of potential numbers. And once you have that uncertainty as your context, really to borrow from Ted Shepard at the University of Reading, the societally relevant question becomes, what is the impact of our actions under an uncertain regional climate change? And that really sort of belongs in the what can happen category. So we reached out to stakeholders really as a way to help us design and start to ask ourselves the right questions. But one thing that we wanted to do is really have a capacity building element to it. So we invited a series of plenary speakers to provide a different sectoral perspective on the entire process. So we had Matt Palmer talking about the provision of climate projections, in particular sea level rise. Kenesha Garnett provided an academic perspective. Daphne Sifnirti from EDF provided a perspective from big coastal infrastructure, think nuclear power stations. And Doug Pender provided a more sort of coastal engineering, coastal consultancy point of view. Then we split people in breakout group discussions. We had a series of questions to help them go through the discussions and elicit some interesting outcomes. And we also had a questionnaire at the start and the end of the workshop. So very quickly into some of the outcomes. So I said three big themes. The first theme is really around the robustness of scenarios. And the first thing that really came out of the workshop is that it might seem very obvious, but we really have to address the right scales, both in time and in space, And what was very clear from the participants is there's a very strong emphasis from a spatial scale at sort of the local to UK scale, and a lot less interest in the European to global, so the more sort of climate change, global climate change time question. In terms of time scale, similar thing, that people were mostly interested in the shorter time scales all the way up to about a century. Longer time scales, significant drop in interest. One slightly puzzling and interesting outcome from the workshop has been a tension between a desire from our participants to for a whole system approach. I'm not going to say what they meant by this, versus what they really showed as compared to other types of scenarios. They had somehow less interest in really chasing socioeconomic scenarios, which was a little bit puzzling. But one of the really important things that really came through and shown through the entire workshop was really the importance of co-development, or even agile development, really in a process that people told us they really thought that it had to be expert-led, but with a very strong engagement between scientific experts and coastal managers, so that we can really achieve a good balance between what managers wish we could do and what we can tell them that we can actually do. And that moves me on to the second aspect, which is about the consistency of the scenarios. And one interesting comment that came through was about a lack of overall framework and user guidance around the entire process. And it looks to me that this is a bit of a common theme that is starting to come up from today. Why is that important? Well, it's important because if you're looking at a lot of different coastal studies, you want to be able at some point potentially to compare them. And if you don't have consistency between all these studies, it might be very difficult to compare them. But there's also internal consistency and maybe logic within the scenarios. And that really comes from the fact that the coast is a critical interface where you have lots of different environmental domains coming together, but also lots of different disciplines, as you've all seen today with all the different people here. So that really means that we need to broaden our interests, and that can be uncomfortable sometimes, but we still have to do it. One thing that we found really interesting is that during the workshop, we had about an even split between people thinking that we should go for a worst case type logic versus what could be most likely to happen in the future. And the last point here is really, how do we account for new evidence? We all know that as science evolves, the projections for our future are getting refined. The problem that we have when we do that is that if we keep moving the goalposts, then that leads to a loss in confidence. And that really brings me on to the third key point, which is about communication and communicating scenario. That came back and back and back. That there was a widespread agreement that how we communicate it and the narratives behind the scenarios are extremely important. One of the key aspects there is how it relates to the uncertainty, in particular, how the uncertainty increases as you downscale from future society all the way to local impacts. And there's another element in there, which is about the beliefs and perceptions of people and how that might influence how they might interpret and understand what we are telling them. There were three very short tips that came through from the workshop. First one, no mixed messages. That seems obvious, but quite often we're not necessarily fantastic at doing that. The second one is less is more. So focus on a few very good scenarios, well developed. And the last one is multiple media. Bring together visualization techniques, narratives, creative writing. All those different approaches can really help bring life the different scenarios. So now a very quick practical example around Penzance Beach in North Wales. So the North Wales coast has been heavily managed for a very long time. And the local context there is really that there is hold the line policy for all future epochs. the main concern is flooding. And that means that the main target there for the local policymakers and local council is really to maintain the seawall. And that means that all their decision is really coming from responsive inundation modeling. One of the problems is the boundary conditions that we get that are coming from the larger scale of climate, and there's very few choices. And all of that, the local context and the downscaling tools sort of points to very few useful scenarios. And actually, when we're digging a little bit deeper, we can really expand the breadth of all of that by looking at causal networks, for example, from our environmental drivers, really show the importance of beach and the beach geomorphology, which brings us on to potential interventions around beach recharge, which we can then expand, for example, using morphological analysis to other key drivers. And I'll leave it there. Just a couple of things, a couple of quick, potentially easier early success stories would be about an overall framework and user guidance and more engagement in developing UK marine climate projections. Thank you.